Sheriff Thomas Kane knew territorial rules were being breached when he found desperate father Jeremiah Collins selling his 19-year-old daughter Sarah to the highest bidder like livestock. He solved the problem by putting his grandmother's gold ring on Sarah's finger. Would the sheriff's protection become more, or just a new sort of captivity? A hawk diving for prey screamed across the Wyoming plains in the morning. Not the girl pushed against the cabin window who prayed she could fly away. Sarah Mae Collins watched that hawk disappear into the boundless blue sky of October 1878, envying its freedom more than anything else in her 19 years. The glass felt cold on her cheek, colder than the worry that had grown in her belly since yesterday when she heard her father whispering urgently with strangers. "Stop wondering and get here, girl." Jeremiah Collins called from behind her, slurring his words from the bottle he'd been drinking since daybreak. "We have major issues." Sarah's bare feet stuck on the hard wood. Her father's voice made her stomach twist like a snake. The tone he used to sell their last cow, their mother's crockery, and everything else of value was familiar to her. Sarah wanted to run because the one-room cottage smelled like stale whiskey, burnt coffee, and something else she couldn't name. Her weak walls let her hear the October wind roaring across the prairie as a warning. They had lost wheat fields and hopes to a 3-month drought. "No more requests, Sarah Mae." Her mother's silver locket weighed on her throat as she turned slowly. The locket was her one nice possession, and the only item her father hadn't sold. It included a tiny image of her mother, who died when Sarah was 12, leaving only the locket and words that haunted her. "Little star, you're worth more than everyone's offering." Her father stooped over their unsteady kitchen table, counting cash with shaky fingers. Over the past year, his hair had turned gray, and his clothes hung loosely on his diminishing body. The man who previously held her high and called her his sunlight now looked at her, like he needed to get rid of her. "Daughter, sit." Jeremiah's voice grew quieter yet still terrifying. "We must discuss your future." Sarah stands. "Papa, what future? We'll both avoid starvation." The coins were swept into a little pile of $17 and change, nearly enough to repay the bank. "You're 19, old enough to marry and settle." Married hit Sarah like a punch. She dreamed about marriage, but it was filled with love, choice, and a man who gazed at her like she hung the moon. Not whatever her desperate-looking father planned. "Papa, no marriage yet. Maybe in a few years. A couple years are gone." The coins jumped when Jeremiah slammed his hand on the table. "The bank wants their money before month's end or we lose everything. The land, cabin, and everything your mother and I toiled for." Sarah believed her heart might burst from rapid thumping. "Papa, there must be another way. We could sell or I could work in town." "Sell what?" Her father laughed bitterly like medicine. "Look around, girl. Left to sell?" Sarah surveyed their modest abode. Furniture was broken or gone. Walls were bare save for watermarks, trading away even their cooking pots. The only locket left was her mother's, which she held harder, knowing her father could try to sell it too. "Today, a man is coming," Jeremiah said, his voice calmer but more terrifying. "Good guy with money and land. He wants a woman and will pay a lot." Sarah heard pay handsomely like thunder. Her father didn't mention marriage, talking about a sale. "Papa, you can't mean—" I want to benefit us both." Jeremiah stood swaying. "Ezra Hutchins has a promising northern mining claim. He wants a strong woman to assist him work it and will pay well." Mind racing, Sarah backed toward the window. "Money how much?" "Plenty to save the farm and more." Jeremiah ignored her. $27 and a mining claim stake. Exactly $27. She was worth that to her father. Low-quality horse. Less what their old plow was worth before selling. "If I say no," Sarah whispers, "both starve in winter." After Jeremiah stared at her, Sarah noticed something in his eyes that chilled her. It went beyond desperation. A resignation, already decided. "Sarah, you must understand, doing this for us both." The sound of hooves increased outside. With spurs and leather creaking, Sarah's time was running out quicker than water through a busted dam. "He's here," Jeremiah replied, fixing his shirt and smoothing his wild hair. "Now listen, girl. Be nice and respectful. You'll prove your strength and do everything it takes to succeed." Sarah touched her mother's locket again. She felt the metal warm on her flesh and nearly heard her mother whispering about worth and choice. What option did she have? Her father should lose everything or she should die to save them. Hoofbeats stopped outside their door. Jeremiah raged. Our future depends on this. Sarah pressed herself against the window one last time, watching the hawk circle far over the plains, free as the wind. The door exploded open without a knock, and the man inside looked like he could win bear fights for fun. 6 feet tall and nearly as wide, Ezra Hutchins had ham-hock hands and a beard that hadn't been shaved in months. He smelled like horses, tobacco, and something else that made Sarah's nose wrinkle. And his clothing were costly yet soiled. She noticed his missing teeth when he grinned. "Jeremiah!" Hutchins bellowed, marching inside their cabin like his own. "Happy to meet you, old friend." Sarah saw her father's desperate nervousness turn into phony joy. "Come in, Ezra. May I offer coffee?" "I'll do." The chair Hutchins dragged out creaked under his weight. Sarah was immediately caught by his small dark eyes, which scanned her like livestock at auction. "This must be the girl we mentioned. Sarah May," Jeremiah said hastily. "Sarah, greet Mr. Hutchins." Sarah felt stuck to the floor. Every instinct told her to run, but where? They were 20 miles from town and she had no money, horse, or friends to help her, Hutchins murmured, glancing at Sarah. "She's bashful. I enjoy that in women. Today, too many have too much to say." Pouring coffee with shaking hands, Jeremiah said, "Sarah's a good girl. Obedient, hardworking, cooks and cleans. She'll make a good wife." Wife. The word sickened Sarah. This was about possession, not marriage. Hutchins didn't want a partner. He was looking for a multi-purpose servant. "Let me see her teeth," Hutchins replied nonchalantly, like Sarah wasn't there. "Her teeth?" Jeremiah seemed lost. "You check a horse's teeth before buying, right?" "Same principle," Hutchins impatiently gestured. "Come on, girl, use your mouth." Shame and rage burnt Sarah's face. "I'm not a horse." The words escaped her before she could stop them. Both men were appalled by her father. "Amused, Hutchins. I see spirit." Hutchins laughed. "All right, I can break spirits easily. Had plenty of wild horse experience." Jeremiah snarled as Sarah apologized. But Sarah couldn't apologize. Her throat was pricked by the words. She was impoverished, desperate, and confined, but she wasn't a commodity. Hutchins waved a meaty hand. "No apology required. My ideal woman has a little fire. Funnier to break." The nonchalant malice in his words chilled Sarah. This went beyond saving her father's farm. She needed to survive. "Tell me her job history." Hutchins sat back and continued. "My claim is in the mountains 60 miles north. I need someone who can manage tough country." Jeremiah boasted that she's run this household since her mother died. Cooking, cleaning, fixing, gardening. Strong as an ox, she's doubly handy. Sarah wanted to shout. Father listed her abilities like store catalog items. 7 years of protecting him and forsaking her goals to run their home. He compensated Herbie by selling her to the highest bidder. "What about kids?" Hutchins inquired directly. "Sons are needed for claim work. She appears healthy enough to reproduce." The term breed blurred Sarah's vision with wrath and terror. She wasn't livestock, not a broodmare. She had feelings, thoughts, and dreams that no one seemed to care about. Jeremiah said, "She's young and healthy. Big hips, robust constitution." Her mother had 3 children before Sarah, but sickness killed them. Sarah was unaware of the other babies. Before her, her father never mentioned deceased siblings. She was hit hard by the news of lost siblings and the fact that her father had planned this conversation for weeks, preparing answers to questions she never thought anybody would ask about her. Good lineage. Hutchins nodded yes. "How about education?" "I don't want a lady to talk to my son about literature. Sarah can't read much." Jeremiah lied well. "Just enough for recipe calculations. Nothing flashy, another falsehood." Sarah learned to read from her mother's old Bible and anything the traveling preacher gave her. Reading was her escape, her hidden joy, and her only possession. Her father lied about even that to sell. Perfect. Hutchins drank coffee and wiped his lips with his palm. "All right, pricing." Sarah watched helplessly as the 2 men negotiated her destiny like furniture. Hutchins offered $20. Her father offered $35. They agreed to $27 plus a half stake in Hutchins' mining claim, which may be worthless to newcomers. Hutchins out his large hand to negotiate, adding the girl's stuff. "Deal!" Sarah wanted to puke when Jeremiah enthusiastically shook hands. "Taking her with me today," Hutchins said. "No need to wait." I'll get supplies in town before we drive north to the claim. Sarah felt the world swirl today. Within hours, she would leave her sole home to live with a stranger who treated her like property. Jeremiah told Sarah to pack. Be quick. Getting started excites Mr. Hutchins. Sarah's legs drove her toward the corner where she kept her mother's Bible, 2 outfits, a scarf, a brush, and other small items. Everything from 19 years fit in a little bag. She heard the men talking practical matters like how long the voyage would be, what supplies they'd need, and when Hutchins would return with those promised funds as she packed. They made pleasant, business-like noises like they were discussing the weather instead of killing her life. As Sarah folded her mother's quilt, their only lovely possession, she heard something that chilled her. If the girl doesn't work out, Hutchins whispered, if she's too much hassle or can't manage the task, I may need to make other arrangements. What arrangements? Jeremiah asked. The northern mining camps are an option. Many guys would pay well for female company, if you get my point. Sarah was slammed by the meaning. Unless she was a good wife and hard-working, Hutchins would sell her to a mining camp brothel. Her father replied with a low mumble she couldn't hear, but he didn't object. Sarah's hands shook as she packed, remembering her mother's voice. Your worth exceeds anyone's offer. She was worth $27 and half a mining claim that may not exist. As she took up her luggage and prepared for her fate, hoofbeats again echoed across the grassland. Every cabin resident froze like deer hearing a hunter's gun at the sound of heavy feet on wooden steps. Sheriff Thomas Kane opened the door without knocking, casting a black mist over the room. His insignia glowed warningly in the dawn light. Well, Kane said, his voice low and firm, it appears I arrived in time. Sarah's heart raced. She had seen the sheriff around town, but not this close. She saw him as bigger than she recalled, with muscular shoulders and hands that could break or fix things. His black eyes took in her father's shaking hands, Mr. Hutchins sitting like a king on his throne, and Sarah standing at the window like a bird ready to fly away. Her father said, "Good morning, Sheriff," but his voice squeaked like a rusted gate. He was merely chatting with my neighbor. Removed his hat, Kane placed it on the table with the coins. His dark brown hair had gray streaks, like winter was coming early. You say friendly chat. Funny, Mrs. Henderson from the general shop informed me she heard something suspicious about your daughter's business venture. Sarah's cheeks grew heated. People in town talked about her like a market cow. Her stomach stung with guilt and something more. Some optimism that someone cared about her situation. Mr. Hutchins reclined and crossed his broad arms. Sheriff, this doesn't seem illegal. A father can decide his daughter's future. Arrange? Kane's eyebrows raised in doubt. This is a clever way to say sell, right? The words thundered through the room. Mr. Hutchins grew scarlet like a summer sunset, and Sarah's father paled like milk. Kane stood still, waiting for a response. Wait a minute, I'm offering this girl a nice home and a chance to be productive, Hutchins said. Rising up so fast his chair scraped the floor. Her father and I reached a good compromise. Mrs. Collins felt that Kane was seeing something no one else had seen when he looked at Sarah. He said, it was like talking to a scared animal in his kind voice. Do you approve this deal? The question hovered like campfire smoke. Sarah opened her mouth but said nothing. No one had asked her what she wanted. Her father decided. While alive, her mother made selections, and Mrs. Henderson at the store informed her which dress fabric to buy. Sarah was never asked what she wanted. She's shy, her father said hastily. Girls' best interests aren't always clear, is it? Something about Kane's lower voice scared me. I think sensible grown ladies can talk for themselves. He approached Sarah at the window. From close she smelled leather, soap, and something clean and safe that reminded her of Sunday mornings with her mother, when the world made sense. Kane said, Miss Collins. Speaking to her as if the two men weren't there, the law lets you choose your spouse. You're 19 and can decide for yourself. Sarah believed her heart would burst from its rapid pulse. Her mother's necklace felt warm against her skin, urging her forward. She saw something new in Kane's eyes, kindness without demanding anything in return. She started and stopped. Her father stared at her with concern and worry. Mr. Hutchins glared at her like a stubborn horse. Kane sat patiently like a mountain. Take your time, Kane whispered, talking about your life. The wind was increasing up, and black clouds were gathering, signaling trouble. Sarah could hear the ancient cottage groaning around them, and thought about all the years she had spent here cooking, cleaning, and dreaming of somewhere else. In a whisper, she said, "The law. How does the law address this?" When Kane grinned, his face altered. "Legally, no woman can be coerced into marriage. The law allows you to decline." Mr. Hutchins roared. "This is absurd." "I've paid well," Kane remarked without glancing away from Sarah. "You haven't paid yet. Paying won't happen till the lady accepts." Sarah felt like a long locked door was opening in her chest. She watched her father wring his hands like he was washing phantom dishes. She stared at Mr. Hutchins, who was red-faced and panting. She stared back at Kane, who held out for her response like it was everything. "I need to think," she said. Even as she said, Sarah knew her response. The first fat raindrops slapped the window pane like small fists pounding for cover, while thunder boomed across the prairie like God was bowling in heaven. Her mind raced faster than wild horses as Sarah watched the storm clouds form. The three men behind her were transfixed like chess pieces, waiting for a move. "Consider what?" Mr. Hutchins burst, shaking their plates on the shelf. "Nothing to think about. Your father owes, I need a woman, and you need a home. 2 plus 2 is simple." Sheriff Kane gestured like he was stopping traffic. "Not so easy, Hutchins. I'm here to protect the girl's territorial legal rights." Sarah's father opened like a puppet with new strings. "Rights?" he squeaked. "How about my rights? I've clothed and fed her for 19 years. I owe money, and winter is coming." Sarah was slammed by the words. Her bare feet slapped the wooden floor as she spun around from the window. "Am I just that to you? Way to pay off debt?" Her father stared at her for the first time since Sheriff Kane entered. His eyes were tearful, like a puppy that realized it had done something wrong but didn't know what. "Oh, Sarah, you don't know how hard it has been. The drought ruined our crops, the bank is threatening me, and I have no choice." "There are always options," Kane whispered. Sarah heard something underlying his calm speech, like rage being held back by a solid fence, whether a man makes the proper ones. Outside, lightning briefly illuminated the cabin. Sarah saw her father's desperate expression, Mr. Hutchins' ravenous gaze, and Kane serving as a flood wall in that flash. Kane moved closer to Hutchins and said, "Let me tell you what I see. I observe a man trying to buy a person like furniture, and another selling his daughter to address his issues." A bruising turned Hutchins' face purple. "Sheriff, guard your words. This gal gets more from me than anywhere else. She has a roof, food, and honest employment." "Honest work?" Sarah found her voice again, and it was stronger than expected. "Honest job, what kind?" Hutchins treated her like a stupid child, asking silly questions, cooking, cleaning, gardening, having babies to help with the mining business when they're old enough, women's labor. Words fell into the room like stones into deep water. Sarah felt a chill in her gut. She sometimes daydreamed about marriage while hanging laundry or baking bread. In her dreams, she had love, kindness, and someone who cared to know her opinion. She questioned, what if I don't want kids right now? What if I wish to read better or aid town kids? Hutchins laughed unhappily. "Read? A woman needs what for reading? That will fill your head with silly ideas and make you lose your place." When Kane walked forward, his presence filled the room like stove heat despite without touching anyone. "Her spot? It is. Rooster-like." Hutchins puffs his chest. "A lady should care for her spouse at home, not read books and such." Sarah saw Kane's face shift. It was like watching storm clouds develop slowly but dangerously. He tightened his jaw and made fists at his sides. Kane remarked, "Mr. Hutchins, soothing yet razor-sharp, you and I disagree on a woman's role." Harder rain was banging against the roof like 100 horses rushing. Sarah tightened her scarf and felt her mother's locket warm against her skin. Sarah thought about her mother, who could read and write, who told her stories about heroic women who saved themselves instead of waiting for others. "My mother read," Sarah said unexpectedly. "Mom taught me letters before dying. She compared knowledge like a lamp in a dark room. You were never lost again once you had it." Hutchins sneered. "See? That's exactly what I mean." Girls filled her head with romantic rubbish. "I'll fix that quickly." But Kane was staring at Sarah with awe. "Your mother was smart. She taught you what else?" She felt her heart soar like a bird. Nobody had asked her about her mother's lessons. "She showed me that a person's worth isn't based on price." She claimed everyone has something unique that can't be bought or sold. Hutchins murmured, "Foolishness. That kind of thinking will make a lady unhappy in her role." The sheriff's expression made Sarah's tummy flutter as Kane faced Hutchins. He looked like a man who had decided something important. "Know what, Hutchins?" Kane stated. "I doubt Miss Collins will marry you." Words exploded in the room. Sarah thought the floor had vanished when Hutchins' mouth opened and her father choked. "Sheriff, what are you saying?" Hutchins asked, his voice venomous. Kane took something light-catching from his vest pocket. Simple gold ring that appeared antique, beautiful, and full of stories. Kane said, holding the ring in view, that if Miss Collins is willing, I'd want to offer her another choice. As Sarah's world collapsed, the coffee cup fell. Sheriff Kane had just said something illogical. Marriage, safety, choice. She felt like she could break when her bare feet stepped away from the broken parts. "You saying what?" Sarah whispered. Her voice shook like winter leaves. Although Kane watched Hutchins, his words were for her. "You don't have to accompany him. There's another safety option." Hutchins laughed unhappily. "Sheriff, can you take my stuff?" "She's not yours," Kane said. Though modest, his voice filled the room. "No one owns her." Father of Sarah slapped fist on table. The coins bounced and dispersed. "Need that cash. The banker arrives tomorrow." Sarah called Papa, her heart heavy as stones. "You'd sell me?" Red-faced Jeremiah. "Not selling. Marriage. Girls do it." "Not like this," Kane said. He looked at Sarah with loving eyes. "You're old enough to pick, Miss Collins, the legislation says." Sarah stroked her mother's locket. She recalled her mother's soothing voice. "Your worth is greater than gold, Star." But what if her papa lost their home? If they had nowhere to go? "Sarah, I don't get it. What kind of marriage?" Pink cheeks on Kane. "A real one. Protect you from him like males. If you want it." He nodded toward Hutchins. Hutchins rose quickly. Bang! His chair fell. Crazy talk. Agreement was made. "We had no deal," Sarah said. Her words were spoken before she could stop them. "Nobody inquired about my desires." Hutchins shouted, "You're a female!" "Girl desires aren't allowed." Something warm rose in Sarah's chest. It felt like good fire, the warm sort, not the hot kind. She said she was 18 and taller. "I can read, write, and think independently." Her dad was stunned. "Sarah may speak carefully," but Kane smiled. "Just a bit." But Sarah noticed. "She's right," he said. "She thinks independently." Outside, the wind accelerated. Around the hut, Sarah heard it whistling. As if covering the sun, storm clouds darkened. "This is too slow," Hutchins said. His hand was on his belt near his knife. "I arrived after spending a lot." "You haven't paid," Kane said. His hand reached for his revolver, but he didn't pull it. "And you won't." Sarah was afraid and bold. Her heart pounded so quickly it felt like a bird attempting to escape. She examined Kane's face, very forceful and honest. She regarded Hutchins. He had chilly, cruel eyes. "If I marry you," she told Kane. "Then what?" Kane responded. "Come live with me in town. Your safety is assured. Learn and do. Choices await you." "If I go with him," she nodded to Hutchins. Kane's jaw tightened. "No more help from me." Sarah closed her eyes. Her mother died when Sarah was 12. She remembered all the nights she dreamed about leaving. She considered her reading and travel goals. When she opened her eyes, Hutchins stared at her like a horse he wanted to acquire. "A question," Sarah said. Now her voice grew stronger. "Why want a woman, Mr. Hutchins?" Surprised, Hutchins glanced. "To cook, clean, and have kids. Why else? What happens after I have kids? You have more kids." Sarah was ill. She regarded Kane. "You desire a wife. Why?" Kane contemplated. "Someone to talk to, someone to live with, an independent person. Even if I reject your requests?" Sarah felt her choice like a heavy garment even then. Thunder rolled outside like God was shifting furniture. The first raindrops hit the window. She saw her father counting coins again, shivering. He looked afraid and aged. She felt terrible for him. She regretted it enough to die. "Sheriff Kane," she said without shaking, "I take your offer." Like smoke, the words hung. Hutchins' face darkened with the storm. Her dad quit coin counting. Kane exhaled. "You sure?" Kane asks. "I'm sure." As Sarah said that, lightning struck outside and Hutchins grabbed his knife. Act 6. The knife came out quickly, but Kane was faster. He grasped Hutchins' wrist before the blade moved. Two men crashed onto the table, scattering coins. Sarah jumped back against the wall, heart racing. Hutchins shouted, "You're making a tremendous mistake, Sheriff." Though bigger, Kane was faster. Kane wound Hutchins' arm behind his back. The knife clanged to the floor. Only thinking you can pull a firearm on a peace officer is wrong. Rain pounded the roof like little boulders. The storm arrived. Sarah's father crawled on his hands and knees to find his coins. "My money. Help me find money." But Sarah saw Kane holding Hutchins. Sheriff wasn't even breathing hard. Hutchins was irritable and red-faced. "Leave me," Hutchins commanded. "That's impossible," Kane answered quietly. "You committed a lethal weapon assault." Thunder rumbled above, shaking the cottage. Sarah had never heard thunder so loud. It sounded like the world was falling apart. Her father phoned Sarah, who stopped and helped me. Sarah didn't move. She pondered what Kane stated regarding her own choices. This was another option. She said, "No, Papa." With coins in each hand, her father glanced up from the floor. "You said what?" "No," I said. Sarah's voice was steady despite her stormy mood. "I won't help you sell me." Jeremiah blanched. "Do as I say, Sarah May Collins." Again, Sarah said no. "I won't." Kane smiled while holding Hutchins. "Jeremiah, your daughter may have found her voice." A moment of daylight like lightning flashed outside. Sarah observed something shocking in that instant. Through the glass, she saw more men approaching the cabin, 3 on horseback in the rain. She shouted, "Sheriff, check outside." Head turned Kane. He became serious when he spotted the bikers. "Your friends, Hutchins." Even with his arm behind his back, Hutchins smiled. "I brought help in case you caused me trouble." "Sarah," Kane said calmly but firmly, "rifles are behind the door. Can you reach?" Sarah clutched the long gun with shaking hands. She was surprised by its weight. Though she'd never held a rifle, she'd seen her father clean his hunting gun often. "I don't know how to use this," she muttered. "No need," Kane said. "Hold it and act like you do." The 3 men stopped at the cottage. Horses stomped and snorted in the rain. One said, "Hutchins, you in there?" Hutchins shouted inside. "Sheriff's got me, but not for long." Kane sighed. This became more complicated. Sarah felt both afraid and strange. She was mad. She was taken like a sack of grain by these men. They believed they could ride up and take her. "How many bullets does this weapon have?" she asked. Looked shocked, Kane. 6? Why? Just curious. Front door crashed. 3 men stood there dripping rainwater and looking menacing. All had guns. The biggest one said, "Let him go, Sheriff. We won't break the law, but we will if necessary." Sarah advanced with the rifle. Her hands stopped shaking. "If you make us, we'll give you difficulty." All 3 men regarded her. They presumably expected her to hide behind Kane, not fight him. Big man remarked, "Little girl, stop using that pistol before you hurt yourself." "Not small," Sarah said. "I'm not your girl." Sarah could tell Kane was proud of her as he held Hutchins. Even in the weak cabin light, his eyes shone. "Your move?" Kane addressed the 3 guys. "This territory hangs peace officers for assault." Thunder rolled again, softer. Sarah felt like her storm was just starting as the worst of the storm passed. She fought for herself for the first time. A man stepped forward. Sarah shocked everyone, including herself. She pointed the rifle at him and remarked, "That's far enough, clearly." In that moment, standing in her father's damaged hut with rain on the roof and her mother's locket warm against her heart, Sarah Collins knew she would never be afraid again. Would these men be wise enough to leave? Like deer hearing a hunter's footstep, metal hitting wood froze everyone in the cabin. Kane took something from his vest pocket that caught the weak rain-streaked window light. Sarah gasped when she saw what was in his aged palm. It was a plain gold ring, worn smooth by years of loving hands, as solid and substantial as the mountains that encircled their valley, unlike the jewelry she'd seen affluent people wear in town. The thin, strong band had tiny flowers etched around its edge, which you had to look close to see. Mary Kane, my grandmother, owned this. She wore it for 62 years. "Through good times and terrible," the sheriff remarked, his voice quiet as morning mist. "Before dying, Mom asked me promise something vital." Hutchins shifted in his chair like a snake preparing to strike. His large fingers were constantly making fists, and his face was crimson like a sunset. "Kane, stop being serious." "I'm promised that, gal." "Who promised?" Kane inquired, staring at Sarah. "Did anyone ask her wishes?" Sarah wondered whether anyone could hear her heartbeat. In Cain's palm, the ring shone like a small sun. She thought about her mother's stories of women choosing their own lives, which looked like fairy tales until now. "You promised what to your grandmother?" Sarah asked, shocked by her firm voice. His expression transformed as Cain smiled. "Give this ring solely to a woman brave enough to choose her own path," she urged, "one who wouldn't let others judge her." He hesitated, studying Sarah's expression. "She said I'd recognize her when we met." The heavens thundered like God was rearranging furniture in heaven. The rain was getting harder, hammering on the roof with never-tired fingers. Lightning briefly whitened the world before darkness returned. Jeremiah Collins appeared unwell. "Sarah, consider your actions. Mr. Hutchins' money could save our farm. All our hard work will be lost without it." Sarah whispered, "Everything you've worked for. Never got to choose my employer." Hutchins sprang up so rapidly his chair crashed backward. "2 days brought me here, and I'm not leaving empty-handed." "We agreed, Collins." Cain interrupted Hutchins and Sarah to say the deal was off. "No one may be sold like a horse or cow. That's legal." "Your law," Hutchins raged. "A man's word is his bond here." Collins promised. "I promised my property," Jeremiah replied, shaking. "Fathers can decide what's best for their daughters." "Does he?" Cain checked Sarah again. "Your age is 19, Miss Collins. Man voting age. Old enough to own land, start a business, or make life decisions. Old enough to choose a spouse." Sarah felt something stirring in her chest, like a caged bird that almost forgot how to fly. She stared at her father, then Hutchins' cruel eyes and clutching hands, then the sheriff's offer of something new, choice. "What would it imply if I accepted that ring?" she asked slowly. "Being my wife means I'm protecting you." "Wyoming allows common law marriage," Cain said. "In addition, you would select what happens next in your life." Sarah heard the mantel clock ticking seconds like a heartbeat as the room fell quiet. She envisioned a different life as she remembered all the mornings she'd viewed through this window. Each night she wondered if this cabin would be her world forever. Hutchins took a knife from his belt, its blade gleaming wickedly. "I bought that chick and am taking it." Sarah moved already. She advanced and extended her left hand to Cain. "I pick you," she said, her voice clear as a church bell. "I pick my life." Cain placed the ring on her finger, and it fit like it had always been there. The cabin air altered when the gold touched her skin. Sarah felt taller and stronger, finally fit for her life. "Now you've done it," Hutchins replied, brandishing his knife. "I'll take that chick whether she likes it or not." But Cain was faster than bottle lightning. A knife fell to the floor as he wrenched Hutchins' wrist. The enormous man kneeled, howling with the thunder. Cain calmly remarked, "That's peace officer assault. That deserves 30 days in jail." Sarah examined her finger ring. Cain's touch warmed it and caught the lamplight like a promise. Her life now belonged to her. 3 hours later, Judge Morrison's office above the general store hosted the wedding while rain kept tapping on the windows, like people trying to get in. Sarah wore her mother's blue dress, her only decent thing, and brought a few wildflowers Cain had picked from behind the jail. Judge Morrison was round with pleasant eyes and a gray, cloud-like beard. He'd married countless of couples, but this one felt different. Perhaps the bride kept caressing her ring like she couldn't believe it was real, or the groom stood protective, but not possessive beside her. "Do we have witnesses?" the judge questioned, surveying the little office. When she heard about the wedding, Mrs. Peterson, who ran the downstairs general store, came up. She was little with acute eyes and seemed to know everything in town before it happened. She remarked, straightening her apron, "I'll witness, but this is the most excitement we've had since the bank robbery last spring." Doc Harrison was curious about Mrs. Peterson's complimentary coffee on special occasions and wandered in. He was an old man who had delivered half the territory's infants and reconciled the other half after fights. "Please include me," he said. "I enjoy love stories." Sarah's cheeks warmed. She started to explain it's not a love story, but Cain softly clasped her hand. He added gently, so only she could hear, "Maybe not yet." "It's possible." Judge Morrison cleared his throat and opened his large leather book. "Dearly beloved, we are here to marry Thomas Michael Cain and Sarah Mae Collins." Sarah's heart pounded like a drum. She kept thinking about how different this morning had been when she was a girl in her father's cabin with no options or hope. She was about to marry in a judge's office, but not in the way she'd always feared. "I felt like I was entering a broader universe instead of being confined." "Thomas," the court said, "do you regard Sarah as your rightful wife?" To have and hold in sickness and health, richer or poorer, as long as you live. Sarah caught her breath when Cain turned to face her and showed her his brown eyes. It wasn't Hutchins' ravenous look or her father's exhausted displeasure. It was simple respect. Cain responded, "I do," with a rock-solid voice. Judge Morrison asked Sarah, "Do you take Thomas to be your legitimate husband, to have and retain in sickness and health, richer or poorer, as long as you both live?" Sarah remembered her mother, who died when she was 12 but always reminded her that a woman's worth was evaluated by her heart and spirit, not who wanted to marry her. She thought about all the ladies who had come before her and made the best decisions with their possibilities. She said, "I do," feeling like she'd never spoken anything more true. Judge Morrison grins, "I pronounce you husband and wife under Wyoming Territory authority. You can kiss your bride, Thomas." Cain kissed Sarah delicately, like she was valuable and may break if touched harshly. Her first true kiss tasted like freedom, opportunity, and better days. "That was lovely," Mrs. Peterson clapped. "Sarah, you're a lovely bride." Doc Harrison took a little flask from his coat pocket. He suggested celebrating, passing it around. "Territory's best whiskey." Sarah respectfully shook her head, but Cain took a drink and gave it to Judge Morrison. After the rain stopped, late afternoon sunlight broke through the clouds, pouring golden beams through the office windows. Cain reached inside his coat pocket again and replied, "There's more. Every bride deserves a wedding gift." He took out a little gold-lettered leather book. Reading Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen opened Sarah's eyes. Cain questioned, "Can you read?" but seemed to know. "Yes," Sarah muttered, handling the book like gold and jewels. "My mother taught me before she died, but my father thought it was pointless for a woman." "My first wife taught," Cain said. "She left an entire library. She always felt education was the best gift." Sarah began to cry, but happy tears. In one day, she went from being sold like cattle to marrying a guy who valued her thinking as much as her work. She went from having no options to a husband who gave her books and treated her equally. "Mrs. Cain," Judge Morrison continued, and Sarah understood he was referring to her. "Please join the married family. May your new life bring you joy. Sarah May Cain, Mrs." The name felt like fitting into garments after years of wearing them too small. Sunset over the mountains painted the sky pink, gold, and purple. Sarah held her husband's hand and her first wedding gift at the window of her new life, knowing tomorrow would bring many unknown problems. For the first time in 19 years, she didn't fear tomorrow. She eagerly anticipated its contents. "You're not welcome, Sarah Cain." The angry voice sliced through the morning air. Mrs. Eleanor Whitman blocked the general store entry with her arms folded. In agreement, 3 town women twisted their heads behind her. Sarah married Sheriff Cain precisely 2 weeks ago. She walked into town Tuesday morning to buy wheat and sugar. Instead, she faced Wyoming's meanest women. Sarah responded quietly, "I have money to spend like everyone else." She kept her voice steady, but her heart raced like a rabbit fleeing a predator. Mrs. Whitman replied with money from luring our sheriff into marriage. Her face was flushed with rage. "Everyone knows your true self. Your father marketed you like a cow." Sarah felt the words like stones in her chest. Shame made her cheeks boil. People on the street stopped walking. They stood watching the event like it was a special entertainment for them. Sarah had her mother's silver locket around her neck. She thought of all the novels she'd read in Cain's house, books about bold women who stood up for themselves and people who exceeded expectations. Sarah lifted her chin, saying, "I'm Mrs. Thomas Cain, and I'm staying." Mrs. Whitman approached. "That'll be considered. This town handles out-of-place women." The menace hovered between them like fire smoke. Sarah recognized this went beyond supplies. She wondered if she'd have any friends in town and be accepted any place but at home. That afternoon, Sarah sat alone in Cain's kitchen. Without him, the enormous house felt empty. He rode out that morning to check on cattle thieves on the North Ridge. His return was tomorrow night. After old Mr. Peterson urged the women to leave, she bought her flour and sugar. Their words rang in her ears like unstoppable church bells. She looked up from her book to hear horses outside. Through the window, she observed 4 unknown guys harnessing their horses to the fence, in shabby clothes and with firearms on their hips. Something about their movement made her stomach tighten with fear. Her door was knocked loudly, then 3 times, each sounding like a fist hitting the wood. I'm sorry to interrupt, but if you're enjoying this story, please subscribe to our channel to see more. Like the video and share your ideas in the comments. Now enjoy the narrative, a harsh voice cried out. Mrs. Kane, we know you're in there. We must talk. Sarah put down her book and silently went to the window. She peered through the curtain. Now men stood on her front porch. One was scarred on his left cheek. Someone kept spitting brown tobacco juice into the earth. Your husband detained our friend last week, the scarred guy continued. We hope you can assist us negotiate. Sarah's mouth dried. She understood who they meant. Kane arrested horse thief Jake Morrison. Morrison was in the municipal jail waiting for the judge next month. Sheriff isn't here, she said through the door. You must return later. Oh, we know he's not here, he chuckled. Not a good chuckle. That's why we came today. Sarah's hands shook. She searched the house for protection. Although Kane's rifle sat over the fireplace, she'd never shot a gun. There was a big knife in the kitchen, but she had to get near to the attacker. Another voice added, Lady, we're coming in. Take it easy. The front door handle turned. Sarah realized with horror that she hadn't locked it in her childhood cottage. They had nothing to steal. This house was distinctive. The life was different. The door opened gently. Above the fireplace, Sarah grasped the rifle. It was hard to hold her hands firm as they shook. She'd seen Kane clean it several times, but she wasn't sure it was loaded. As he entered, the scarred guy said, Now, not necessary. We want a friendly chat. Sarah told you to leave my house. She had a smaller voice than desired. Your home? The man grinned with broken brown teeth. Funny thing, your marriage is rumored to be fake. More like a commercial deal to avoid controversy. Sarah's face heated up again. These perpetrators knew about her marriage rumors. Her life seemed to be discussed by everyone in the territory. You want what? She asked. Simple, he said. Write your husband a note. Request to see his lovely wife again. He'll release Jake Morrison. Join us for a journey till the deal is done. Sarah's mind raced. If she followed these men, she might never return. If she refused, they may hurt her in her kitchen. In either case, Kane would regret leaving her. She considered the town women who'd called her names that morning. They presumably claimed she got what she deserved. They'd probably argue Kane was better off without her. But then she remembered. Kane offered her a choice. He asked what she wanted, not what was best for everyone. He valued her opinion. Showing him that his trust wasn't wasted would be appropriate. I'll compose your note, Sarah answered softly. You must first swear not to hurt anyone in town. This is between you and the sheriff. The scarred man grinned widely. See that, boys? Little lady thinks she can negotiate with us. Sarah, I'm serious. She attempted to sound stronger than she felt. Promise me or I won't help. Men glanced at each other. Finally, the leader shrugged. Fine. If your husband cooperates, no one gets wounded. Put down the weapon and write the note. Sarah put the revolver away and went to Kane's desk. She took his pen and paper. Her mind was planning something else while she typed. These males assumed she was a scared girl who would obey them. They were about to discover their error. Hidden behind a wall of red rocks that looked like huge teeth against the evening sky was the abandoned mine shaft 3 miles north of town. Sarah had been bound to a wooden post in the old mining building for about 6 hours. The scratchy rope pained her wrists and dried her mouth like desert sand. Her mind was bright and clear. 4 men played cards and drank whiskey around a little fire. They watched the entryway for Sheriff Kane and their friend Jake Morrison. What they didn't know was that Sarah wrote 2 messages that afternoon. They saw her compose the first message. It had Kane bring Morrison to the mine to trade for her safety. Sarah hastily wrote another note while pretending to seal that letter. She slid it into her boot before the men saw. She dropped the second message outside her front door after being forced onto a horse to the mine. She simply hoped Kane would find it at home. Should have been here by now, murmured the scarred man. He kept checking his pocket watch as if it would speed up time. Another man suggested the sheriff may not care as much about his wife as we assumed. This one had a black rope-like beard that reached his chest. Worry struck Sarah. If Kane didn't arrive? Imagine if he thought she wasn't worth it. Their marriage was meant to shelter her from Hutchins. Kane never vowed to love or die for her. After hearing something hopeful, her heart raced, horses speeding up the rough road to the mine. It'll be him, said the leader. He stood and checked his rifle. Keep it simple, boys. We get Morrison, they get the girl, everyone's happy. Sarah saw a horseman in the fading light through the mine building's open entrance. Something seemed amiss with the rider's emblem, which caught the final sunshine. Kane was alone and sat still in his saddle. "Morrison, where?" Scarred Guy shouted. Kane spoke again. "Safe. Where's my wife?" The man said she was here. "Before we deal, you must comprehend. We have friends across this region. If we die tonight, your gorgeous wife won't see morning." Sarah saw Kane get off his horse. Even from afar, she could see his cautious movements, like a cat poised to attack or a man with a plan. "Can I see her?" Kane asked. Leader took Sarah's arm and drew her to the door. Though her wrist rope made it hard to balance, she managed to stay upright. "There she is," he said. "Safe and sound as promised." Kane looked at Sarah across the gap. That moment, she saw something that made her heart sing like spring birds. He didn't see her as a burden to rescue. He looked at her like she was everything. "You bring Morrison out here and we'll—" Horses from 3 directions interrupted him. Men with badges and rifles surrounded the mine suddenly. Behind a rock formation, Deputy Williams appeared. Marshal Tucker arrived from another direction. Old Mr. Peterson from the general shop was there with a shotgun almost as old as he was. "The heck," the bearded man spoke. "Kane ordered you to disarm." His authoritative voice deterred even deadly individuals from fighting. Sarah smiled broadly. Her second note was beautiful. She told Kane about the mine and urged he bring help. Lots of aid. 4 robbers looked around at all the firearms pointing at them. They lowered their rifles slowly. "You did how?" the leader started. "Kane claimed his wife is brighter than you think." He spoke with pride, warming Sarah's chest. "She instructed me." Kane approached Sarah as the deputies bound the culprits. To restore feeling, he cut the cords around her wrists with his knife and gently caressed her painful hands. "You took a great risk," he whispered. "Writing that second note may have killed you if caught." Sarah said, "I had to try. I couldn't keep doing nothing." Kane gazed into her eyes. "That note and what happened made me feel something I hadn't felt in a while, Sarah." "It was what?" "Fear," he said. "Genuine dread of losing someone I care about." Sarah's heart raced again, but not from danger. "Thomas, our marriage started as protection, but it might change," he finished. "Not if you disallow it." In the darkening sky above them, evening stars appeared. Around them, deputies loaded criminals onto horses for the voyage home. Sarah simply saw the man in front of her. She stated, "I thought of something while tied up. People always told me my worth. My father valued me at $27 and a mining claim. Hutchins valued me at his discretion. The women in town today stated I was worthless." He waited for her to continue. Sarah continued, "When you looked at me now, I finally grasped my mother's advice. She said others couldn't judge my worth. It was mine to claim." "How much are you worth?" Softly, Kane inquired. Sarah grinned. "I'm worth choosing my happiness. Thomas Kane, I pick you. I want to develop a true life with a wonderful man, not for protection." Kane replied with a calm, lovely kiss under the Wyoming sky. Sarah saw her future like the prairie when they broke up. It would face obstacles and storms like life, but it would be her life, chosen and lived alone. "Come on, Mrs. Kane," Thomas offered his arm. "Return home." Sarah touched her mother's locket again as they approached their horses. She silently thanked all the women who had dreamed of her choice. She got on her horse and went toward town with the man who had shown her that real love wasn't for sale. It was about 2 people choosing each other daily and creating something lovely. The old thinking faded behind them, but house lights shone brightly, promising tomorrow and all tomorrows. Screams cut the morning air like silk. After dropping the coffee pot, Sarah hurried toward the sound, bare feet smacking the wooden floor. She saw heavy black smoke from town through the kitchen window, indicating disaster. Thomas stormed through the front door, his countenance gloomy. He said banks were robbed, putting on his pistol belt. 3 mask-wearing males. When Mr. Peterson tried to stop them, they stole everything and shot him. Heart jumped into Sarah's throat. She had been treated well by old Mr. Peterson, the general store owner, since she arrived in town. Never hurt anyone in his life. "Is he?" "Doc Miller is with him, but Sarah, there's more." Thomas paused at the door, hand on frame. "Robber misses. Henderson claims his voice was familiar. Your father." Words hit Sarah like a punch. Her legs weakened and she grabbed a chair back to avoid falling. Her history returned like a wild horse with its tail on fire after weeks of establishing a new life. She muttered, "That's wrong. Papa Wooden doesn't." While speaking, Sarah remembered her father's sad gaze and shaking hands as he counted those meager coins previous morning. How far would a desperate guy go with nothing to lose? I must find them after Thomas crossed the room in 3 steps and grasped her hands. The track is new, and if we wait, they'll go into the mountains forever. Sarah could see her husband's conflict in his eyes. His responsibility as sheriff and his desire to shield her from this terrible truth conflicted. But Sarah had learned something essential in recent weeks. Avoiding hard realities makes them scarier. She said, "I'll join." "Not at all." Thomas firmly shook his head. "Too risky. And what else? I'm a homebody who should worry." Sarah stood straighter with her hands free. "Here's my father, Thomas Kane. I can reason with him." Thomas seemed ready to quarrel. The set of Sarah's jaw and the fire in her storm-gray eyes reminded him why he fell in love with her. She didn't hide while others fought her fights. "Can you ride?" he inquired. Sarah smiled for the first time that morning. "Papa taught me to sit a horse, though not much else." 20 minutes later, they rode hard over the plains with Deputy Martinez and 2 town men. The morning sun was rising, but autumn cold lingered. Sarah rode Thomas's spare horse, Daisy, a lovely mare, and tried not to think about what they could find at the end of their hunt. The trail headed north to outlaw hideouts in the rugged hills. From childhood, Sarah knew every creek, canyon, every place a desperate man may stand. Her thoughts began to piece together a horrific puzzle as they traveled. A visitor came through town 3 weeks ago to ask about bank schedules. Sarah saw him talking to someone behind Murphy's saloon but couldn't see who. Now she wondered if it was her father. Deputy Martinez shouted, pointing to a tiny gully with fresh horse traces ahead. Thomas signaled to stop with his hand. The canyon was ideal for an ambush, with steep walls on both sides and one entrance. Sarah examined the rocky hills, her gut tightening with fear. Thomas told Martinez and Johnson to round the canyon back. "I'll climb the main trail with Sarah. Stay and observe the horses, Collins." Sarah abruptly said, "Wait." Something had been bothering her since they started this chase, and suddenly it made sense. "Bank money does." "Know how much they took?" "About $200, Thomas replied. "Why?" Sarah grew pale. "Papa owed Mr. Hutchins $27. The bank would seize our farm for $60 more, not even half of what they stole." Men stared at each other with deepening comprehension. Why would Jeremiah Collins risk everything to steal twice as much if he only needed $100 to cure his problems? Thomas grimly wondered if he was planning this theft or if someone was using his desperation to persuade him to perform their dirty work. New terror seeped into Sarah's spine. Her father was in more danger than they imagined if he was a pawn. Sometimes desperate men can be reasoned with. However, cold-blooded criminals were different. Gunshots sounded from the canyon ahead, cracking off the rock walls like terrible thunder. Sarah's pulse raced as Thomas pushed his horse forward. Sarah knew whatever was in that canyon would change their lives again. But this time, she wasn't the scared girl being sold like cattle. She chose to ride into danger to defend her loved ones. Sarah tightened her reins, bracing for what was to come as the canyon walls loomed like a huge beast. 3 men hid behind fallen logs in a tiny clearing as the canyon opened. Their stolen money was scattered like autumn leaves. When Sarah saw her father's fearful head posture, her heart nearly stopped. Her blood ran cold when she saw the gunman over him. When horses approached, Ezra Hutchins turned, his thick lips drawn back in a toothy smile. Sheriff Kane and his gorgeous wife, on time. "Hutchins, release them," Thomas shouted, holding his revolver. "Just you and me." Hutchins laughed like rocks dropping from a well. "Sheriff, you're wrong. Much more than money is at stake." Grabbed Jeremiah by the shirt and pulled him up. "Tell your daughter what you did, elderly man." Jeremiah had newspaper-colored skin and wouldn't look at Sarah. "Sorry, girl. I'm sorry. But he threatened to burn down the town without my help." Sarah felt like her lungs were punched. "You talking about what, Papa?" Hutchins, his voice silky as snake oil, stated the bank robbery was never about money. "I wanted you here, Mrs. Kane. Your husband disrupted our business, costing me something significant. Now I'll try to get paid." Thomas advanced with a furious jaw. "Your topic is kidnapping a territorial citizen. This is a hangable offense." Hutchins said, "Only if someone survives." The next few events felt like nightmares. Hutchins pointed his rifle at Thomas, but Sarah moved. She saw murder in Hutchins's face after learning to read danger in men's eyes in those horrible weeks before her wedding. "Papa, descend!" Shouting, she accelerated her horse. Chaos erupted in the clearing. When Hutchins fired, Thomas dove to one side, the bullet whining like an agitated bee. Deputy Martinez and his crew came at the clearing's far end with rifles drawn, but Sarah altered everything. She charged Hutchins instead of fleeing as predicted. As Hutchins tried to pull Sarah from the saddle, her horse reared up in surprise at the shooting. He fell backward onto the dirt when the horse's hooves hit him in the chest. Sarah fell off her horse and scraped her hands on the stony ground. She jumped up instantly, waving her mother's locket as she helped her father stand. "You hurt?" she asked, inspecting him for injuries. Jeremiah shook his head, tears rolling down his ancient cheeks. "Why did you seek me? Why jeopardize yourself after everything I did to sell you, getting the snake involved?" Sarah stared at her father, a damaged man who'd lost his way in grief and desperation. She recalled the rage, hurt, and fear she felt from that dreadful morning when he tried to trade her like property. She also remembered the guy who taught her to ride, told her stories by the fire as a child, sobbed the night her mother died, and pledged to always take care of their daughter. "Because you're my papa," she said. "Family stands by each other even when they make awful mistakes." Thomas arrived beside her, breathing hard but unharmed. Behind him, Deputy Martinez was handcuffing Hutchins, who was conscious but gasping from the horse, knocking out his wind. Martinez said the other two males fled. Most of the money was recovered. Thomas nodded and faced Jeremiah. "You're arrested for bank robbery, Mr. Collins. However, considering the threats against your family and town, the judge may be merciful." Jeremiah straightened his shoulders and began to resemble Sarah's childhood friend for the first time in months. "Sheriff, I'll take the punishment. I must atone for my sins." Sarah contemplated her life's unusual turns as they rode back to town. She was a scared, powerless girl 6 weeks before. Now a woman who'd risked her life to save her father, married to a man who admired her bravery, and part of a community that accepted her family's sins without defining them. They reached town's outskirts as the sun sank, coloring the sky gold and pink. Sarah rode with her husband, her father safe but not free, and felt incredible joy from fighting for what mattered and winning. Thomas held her hand, his thumb tracing the gold band that had begun as protection and grown into more. "Mrs. Kane, remind me not to offend you," he whispered. Sarah laughed, music echoing across the grassland. "Sheriff, remember that when you consider leaving me." Sarah was ready to write whatever came next as they traveled home, where lamplight shined warm in windows and families gathered around dinner tables. Some stories didn't finish. They only began new chapters. The bronze church bell bellowed across the town center, beckoning families to the Sunday social that would test Sarah's standing tall lessons. After marrying Thomas 3 weeks earlier, today was her first appearance at a communal gathering where women would either greet her or turn away like judgmental sparrows. Sarah adjusted her blue frock, Thomas's late wife's, to fit her smaller frame and tried to calm her butterflies. The window of their dwelling showed people heading toward the church, youngsters skipping ahead, women carrying cinnamon-scented plates. "You don't have to do this today," Thomas whispered from behind her, his voice soft like morning rain. He stood tall and straight at the doorway, gripping his hat with the hands that had given her a ring and transformed her life. "I do," Sarah said, looking to him with storm-gray eyes full of purpose. "Despite its many great books, I can't hide in this place forever." The church trek felt longer than Earth to stars. Sarah noted how people stopped talking as she approached. Banker's wife, Mrs. Henderson, whispered to general store manager Mrs. Peterson behind her gloved hand. They watched Sarah like hawks studying a mouse in a field, but not everyone was objective. From across the street, Mary Chen, whose family did laundry, smiled and waved. Sarah straightened up as her gesture felt like sunshine breaking through storm clouds. Long tables filled with army-sized food moaned in the church hall. Apple pies and cornbread were next to chicken and dumplings and bacon-seasoned green beans. Conversation and laughing filled the air, until Sarah appeared and silenced the throng like snow. "Well, if it isn't the new Mrs. Kane," exclaimed Mrs. Whitmore, the preacher's wife, with a lovely voice that concealed sharp fangs. "Meeting you properly is intriguing." Everyone in the room looked at Sarah like compass needles pointing north. Though her cheeks burned, she remembered her mother's words that courage wasn't fearlessness. Even if you were scared, it was necessary. Sarah answered Mrs. Whitmore with a rock-solid voice. "Thank you for my community welcome." Mrs. Patterson mumbled from behind her teacup that welcoming might be a strong term, but she didn't drop her voice. Some remember when marriages involved wooing and proper introductions, not rushes. Sarah felt the words like slaps, but Mary Chen materialized at her elbow like a guardian angel in calico before she could answer. "Mrs. Kane," Mary remarked brightly, "I've been wanting to meet you. Tom told my husband you like reading. I'll gladly lend books." "Books?" Disapproval oozed from Mrs. Henderson. "A woman reading while doing housework is rare." Sarah remarked that knowledge never made someone worse, discovering power she didn't know she had. Mom always claimed an educated woman could weather any storm. Sarah noticed other women staring at her, and she understood she had declared herself different. They expected women to acquiesce and apologize, not stand steadfast like trees against wind. The tension may have increased, but little Billy Morrison ran through the corridor, red-faced and gasping. Sheriff Kane, he shouted, scouring the crowd desperately. Thomas emerged from his conversation with the men near the back wall. "Billy, what's it?" "Parker Ranch has issues," the child said, his words falling like rocks down a hillside. "Mr. Parker believes he knows who rustled their cattle in broad daylight." Concerned murmurs filled the room. In their country, cattle rustling was serious business. A man's herd could be his fortune. Sarah watched Thomas's face turn from spouse to lawman. In an instant, his jaw set with terrible purpose. He discreetly told Sarah, "I have to go," and quickly walked to her side. "Will you be okay?" Sarah felt like a deer surrounded by wolves and shepherds when she saw pleasant and cold faces. Yet Mary Chen stood nearby with encouraging looks and saw other women who seemed intrigued rather than cruel. She answered, "I'll be okay," briefly clutching his hand. "Perform your duties." Sarah found herself alone in a room full of ladies who would accept or reject her based on her behavior in the next few minutes, as Thomas ran toward the door with many other males following behind him. As if calling court to order, Mrs. Whitmore cleared her throat. "I suppose we'll see what kind of woman our sheriff has picked," Mrs. Kane murmured, her voice echoing across the still room. Sarah felt every stare on her, knowing her next words would determine whether she made friends or stayed an outsider in her community. The rustlers daringly stole 15 good cattle in the afternoon. Parker stood in Thomas's office 3 hours later, his aged visage gloomy as winter stone. "Sheriff, it was so bad Jake Morrison and his hillbillies." Thomas reclined, contemplating the rancher's angry face while rain pounded on the office windows. Some part of Parker's story worried him, but he couldn't pinpoint what. "Parker, that's a significant charge. Jake Morrison has difficulties, but I've never seen him steal livestock," Thomas said gently. "What makes you sure it was him?" "I saw his horse traces clearly leaving my north pasture," Parker emphasized by hitting his hat against his leg. "His paint horse creates marks unlike any other animal in the area." Thomas saw townspeople racing through the rain using newspapers as umbrellas through the window. The Sunday social ended early when news of the livestock theft spread like wildfire through dry grass. "In clear weather, I'll ride out and investigate tomorrow morning." Though doubt kept nibbling at his thoughts like a rat, Thomas promised. "I won't arrest a man for horse tracks. More proof needed." Parker's face darkened like an approaching storm. "Evidence? Do you need additional proof?" Morrison's struggles since his wife's death are well known. "Sheriff, desperate men act desperate." Parker had no idea how personal the words were. Thomas recalled his desperation after losing his first wife. The bleak months when whiskey was his only buddy. But grieving didn't make a man a thief, despite people's fears. "I'll investigate," Thomas insisted. "I can only promise that until I see the evidence." Thomas sat alone in his office listening to the rain and wondered why the rancher's story felt like a boot that didn't fit after Parker departed, muttering about sheriffs who wouldn't do their duties. Sarah entered the softly creaking door, shaking reins from her shawl like diamonds from paradise. The cold turned her cheeks rosy, and her eyes glittered with mischief. "How was the remainder of the party?" Thomas asked, grateful for her presence after Parker's nasty chat. Sarah responded better than expected, with a smile that could brighten winter at its darkest. "Mary Chen invited me to the women's reading group. Mrs. Davidson requested my help teaching her daughter to read." Thomas's pride rose like mountain sunlight. "I told you the town would like you after meeting you." "Not everyone," Sarah said, sitting in the chair across from his desk like she belonged. "Mrs. Henderson stated that I forced you into marriage for your money and status. What did you reply?" As a cat plotted mischief, Sarah's smile turned nasty. "I told her I would have targeted a man for much more than a small-town sheriff's pay if I wanted to trap him for money. Even though the day was bad, Thomas laughed. You didn't assert it, Sarah said. I did, mockingly. Mary Chen nearly choked on apple cider laughing. Their laughter warmed the office like a well-kept fire. When Thomas heard her Parker's claims against Jake Morrison, the mood subsided. Sarah listened carefully, her brow furrowing while analyzing the details. Something about his narrative bothers you, she said, knowing him well enough to read his expression. All of it bothers me, Thomas said. Parker is too sure and ready to blame. I've found that those who blame others are frequently hiding something. Kind of something? Thomas stood and strolled to the window, watching rain wash the street dust away, while his mind puzzled over options like a lost piece. He may be a stooge. Maybe he's lying about the theft. Maybe he rustled those animals and needs someone to blame. His cattle? Sarah sounded surprised. Grimly, Thomas explained insurance money. Some ranchers hide their livestock and claim theft to get territorial insurance fund money. At the window, Sarah stood close enough for him to smell her lavender hair soap. How will you proceed? Thomas announced that he would visit Morrison tomorrow morning. I'll also examine Parker's ranch to determine if his story holds up. Lightning illuminated the deserted street outside their window in bright white light. Everything appeared sharper, more menacing, like a world where nothing was as it seemed. Thomas, Sarah whispered, her voice tinged with apprehension, making him look down at her worried face. Take care tomorrow. If Parker lies about something so significant, he could be lethal when cornered. Thomas told her he could manage Parker, but he appreciated her worry more than he could say. Sarah said, I know you can, touching his cheek with butterfly-like fingertips. My happiness has just been found, and I won't let others' lies and avarice take it away. Thomas held his wife closer as thunder crashed across the territory, like God's judgment, and pondered what tomorrow's probe would find about neighbors who might not be what they seemed.